What is good, everybody? My name is Alckemy. Today I'm going to be showing you how I made a sound like this. All within the MPC. So this is going to be an advanced tutorial, and I actually filmed this doing everything from scratch, but I don't really feel like that's the most efficient way. So instead I'm going to teach you the mechanics about how to do this, and then you can venture off and figure out how you can apply your own stuff to this. So the big thing is that I am going to be using the OPX4, and I will be talking about how I did everything within here. But most importantly, there is this workflow thing that I want to talk about that is going to help you in your journey with this. So one thing that I want everyone to just kind of like be mindful of right off the bat, like the video, by the way, that'd be great, is that unless if you're using effects on your pad and on your group or like your plugin, that's the only place that you can actually pretty much apply automation to. There's some stuff that you can do within other synths. OPX4 doesn't have very many things that you can automate, but you cannot automate things on your master or on your subgroups. So without that, once you have that kind of like all into play, then that's going to kind of help influence how you make decisions on how to make basses like this. By the way, I mean, I don't really know anybody else that is doing neuro-based stuff or really even sound design within the MPCs. So like the video for that if you can. And if you have any other people that are doing like really intense sound design like this, let me know. So that way I can get in touch with them and trade ideas. So with that out of the way, let's go ahead and turn off everything here. I'm just going to kind of turn off all the effects. And then we're going to talk about how to get a nice sounding Reese within this in general. I'm going to set this to, I'm going to leave that on because it's not really that significant, but I'm going to turn off all the effects here. That's fine. We'll just leave them. All right. So the main thing with this is that there's a few different things that work here. For one, if you want to get a nice sounding kind of saw wave, then what you want to do is you want to set operator 1 to have 30% FM on itself, and then operator 2 at 30% FM on itself. The most important thing with this is that you have both of these set to the same bus. Otherwise, it's just going to be one at a time. So if you're trying to get like detuned stuff, you have to make sure that oscillator or one oscillator is in parallel with another one or serial or whatever. 2 needs to be on. So the other thing with that is that on this guy, this is kind of like the magic formula that I found. So you hit 1.02 and then 0.98 to get your detuning on these. And then this is just at the very beginning, as you can see, as like a donk. So that way it just has a little bit of a hit at the very beginning. But other than that, it's pretty much just these two here that you see. So with that, that's pretty much how you're going to get a nice sounding Reese out of this. The other stuff that's kind of coloring the sound is that we have a band reject or a notch basically right here. And one thing that I like to do is if you look at the modulation right here, we can actually set a random LFO to modulate the cutoff. So you go LFO 1, cutoff 1. When you come back here into your LFO, you can see here that there's a random 2 on this. And if I were to pull this up on here, you can see that it's really important because this guy is a curved thing right here. So whenever you're manipulating stuff like that, make sure that you are just kind of mindful about what you're doing. You can set it to step mode, but because it's a bass and I'm playing a bass line, I kind of want it to move at random. So that's why it's going to sound different every time. So with that, one thing that I wanted to keep in note is that my general approach is that I record a riff first, and then I do the effects to the riff. And the reason why I do it that way within here, say compared to what I was doing in something like Faceplan or whatever, is just for the sheer fact of like efficiency. And also it's a lot easier to have like a nice like fat sounding thing and then apply effects to it and then have a nice original and then reiterate that. So that way you can kind of just like take the best cuts or like replace them and XYZ. So there's that. Now the effects aspect of this, if you keep in mind in the submix, everything in bus 1 goes to effects 1, everything in bus 2 effects 2, and bus 3 effects 3. So the problem with this is you can only use one effect through this, unless if you're doing like individual sends, which could be cool. But I just have a tube distortion on the first effect, and then we have 2 global effects, which is a phaser and flanger. Now the reason why I do this in the OPX4 is because both of these within OPX4 has a low cut. This is something that is unique to the plugin itself. You don't have to have this on here. You can just use 2 detuned saw waves, but this frees up having to do this on the outside, which if you were to take a look at what's going on here, if I were to apply, say something like a flanger here, there's no low cut. So that kind of sucks. Now, as I said before, within this, all of your automation should go within the plugin. So the first thing that we have is, I'm just going to hit play and you'll see how it moves. Now, the parametric EQ can be used as a multi-filter. So you can set both of these to a bell, and you can do a notch, a boost, a notch, a boost. And then while this is playing, you just turn on the read and write, or you turn on the write. And then as this is cycling through, and again, that's why this makes this so much easier to work with, is you just turn this as it goes over time. So I just went, turn one knob for 4 bars, then turn the next one, then turn the next one, then turn the next one. And that's pretty much thematic of what I've done through the rest of this. Now the chorus is the only unique effect on here that actually has the low cut as far as like your spatial things. So you can actually turn this somewhat into a flanger, although it's not as prominent, but that is an option. I just have it set to these settings and then low cut it at like 140-ish. Then on here, this is another unique thing that I wanted to talk about, is that there is a bandpass or a filter that's built into this, but you actually have a dry wet. So what that means, if you've ever seen any like old neuro-based tutorials from Copycat or something, you can use a bandpass on this to help boost those low mids without losing the original signal. Now, for some reason that turned itself off, so you want to make sure that that's on. But now that you have that and you're messing with that touch value, that's only going to help kind of like pull out some of those low mids even more. So finally, we have just a band reject and a low pass together. So when they all play. Now, because of this, all of your automation should go in this section, and because that's all you're going to get really, except there is a couple of caveats. Let's go ahead and head over to the mix, and I want to show you this one first. So there are a few effects that are built in, which is kind of like a filter gate and whatever. And what this allows you to do is pretty much what we did with the bandpass, except in automation. But again, you have a mix on here, so it gives you access to another filter that you can mess with the mix on. So with this, you want to turn the hold all the way up, you want to turn the release all the way up, because that means that it's going to keep the gate on. But while you mess with the cutoff, which unfortunately you can't, again, automate, but you can do it through the pattern here to where it's going to kind of cycle through and move around, you're getting some extra movement through that. There's also some other things like low pass sync and low pass sweep and high pass counterpart, but I don't really like those that much. But from this point, it's pretty much just spatializing this. So as you can see, we've got a little bit of reverb, 9% mix, 1 second, cut the low end around 155. And then I've got just a little bit of distortion to bring this back. The grimy thing is kind of like a nice amp that has a mix on it. That's why I don't use the regular amp. You can turn the talk box on that also has modulation on it if you want it to. So I've got it set to OU and then the formant with a really small mix on this. You can turn this up a little bit if you want, but it sounds like this. Now, obviously within that, everything is really quiet. So on the last set of effects, we're going to pretty much use that for a corrective means. So we can turn the filter on, the compressor, the Flavor Pro, which I'll talk about in just a second. But with this, I'm just doing a little bit of notching right there in the low mids. Then right here on the compressor, this is actually helping bring back a lot of the volume. Let me turn this off, but take a listen to this now. The settings aren't really that important, but what I'm doing is I'm trying to compress everything and then bring it back up together, so that way it doesn't sound so peaky as some of the earlier examples that you heard is. And that's going to be kind of it, is like, even though there's a couple of things on here that are randomized, so it's not always going to be the same, as you can tell. So with that, whenever we talk about the flavor, this is a really cool plugin. It's meant for lo-fi, but you can use it for other things, kind of like distortion, which gives us more distortion models. And that's exactly why I bought this, because it has digital, it's got synth, which is like a wave shaper, diode, speaker, vinyl, transformer, tubes. Tube distortion is great. That would be excellent to use. You've got access to more filters, which since it's on the master, you can't automate, but even still, it's nice that you can kind of like back off of this. So hold on, let me undo that. I didn't mean to do that. But if we were to mess with this and come back to blend, then you can see here that we can actually mess with the mix in this way and kind of back off of it if we need to, or also adjust the width. But you've got all these other things that's like vinyl, digital, which is bit crushing, volume, and warble or wobbling here if you want. So which is nice. So from that, we pretty much just have that last clipper here, which the air distortion is used as a clipper in general, but anytime that you want to make something really loud or something is kind of peaking or whatever and you want to control it, you can use the air distortion on hard clip mode and you can turn this down. But if you look at the master here, you're going to see that even though this is super loud, it's going to be hitting at -3. So once you have all this stuff bounced out, then you want to actually go to the sequence and then hit bounce to sample, because that's what's going to bounce everything post. Once you have that and you have the sequence and stuff, you can either change the notes, you can come back into the program and change this into, you know, a different type of bass. So I can go here, go operator. Maybe I can change this into something a little bit different here that's going to have a little bit more of an impact, but I can adjust this to say like 30%, maybe, you know, 30% as well, and we can listen to how that sounds. But you can see here that through adjusting this stuff, we can pretty much get a bunch of different things, or you can just change the synth entirely or use a completely different preset. So for example, I've got a lot of bass stuff in here. I don't know if it's going to pull it off or not. No, it's not, but you know, you can just detune this in a different way if you want to, or you can pull up mini D, or you can pull up tube synth, I believe is what it's called. So you can just cycle and rinse and repeat. And then once you have that stuff, you can kind of like rinse this out as well. For example, like if I wanted to, I could get rid of the Air Flavor Pro, and I could also get rid of the distortion here, and I could use a flanger. And with the flanger, it's really cool, but it doesn't have that high cut, or sorry, that low cut that I was talking about. So what you can do is you can grab a limiter and a couple of other effects. We're just going to use a limiter on here, but you can grab this and go into this here and set the low frequency mono to be like 140. So now whenever this plays, it's going to sound not quite as strong on the low end, but it's going to be pretty cool in timbre. Right? You can also do this with stuff like flangers, or sorry, phasers, which also sounds pretty good. Unfortunately, again, it doesn't have that low cut on here, but it does sound really good. So you can come into here and also change other things about this. So you can come in and like kind of mess with the effects on here, if I can find it. There we go. Effects 1 we don't really want to touch. It doesn't really make that big of a difference, but instead of the flanger here, we can click on that and go into something like multi-chorus. Again, set that low cut here, and turn the mix down just a little bit. Then on here we can accentuate the phaser a little bit more. And depending on where you place this stuff, right? I would kind of leave the stuff here alone, but I mean, who's to say that we don't go into the mix and change instead of the talk box? That's where we try to put, where we try to put our flanger. Like, this is part of the fun, is to just kind of mess around and see stuff once you have things set up and just be like, all right, well, what does that sound like? Okay, doesn't work. You can try some distortion now. Right? So from there, that's kind of really what it comes down to, in that manner of just messing with this and, changing the effects and the fills and stuff like that, and really just trying everything. There's a lot of effects that I stick to. Most of them are the air ones, but there's so many things in here that you could do that just make it different. And that's what you should be looking for, is not how to do a neurobass inside of Faceplant. You should be looking about how to do a neurobass inside of the MPC, and just exploring the effects is what's really going to make this like more interesting. The last thing that I will say, though, is that if you are working within computer mode, then you absolutely can turn this on and pull up something like multipass on here as a VST. I pulled up car VQ. But if you have any of the presets that I have available on my website, and you just kind of come out of this and open this up here into the master, which is like the last thing on the chain, then you can just pull one of these guys up. User, you can go Monozako, turn this on, go like this, and hit the stereo on, and then see what that does. This might be really loud, so let me actually grab a limiter on here and turn this down. But this is really fun because you're combining the best of both worlds. So from that, you can really just explore all the filter types or do whatever it is that you like to do with these kinds of things. I've got plenty of tutorials on how I work this stuff. But once you have everything set up, then you could just kind of cycle through all this and see how it sounds. But you find that like the workflow is actually more similar than it's different, right? Even with this stuff, it's filtering in the low mids, and this I have a lot more control and blah, 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 but it's still randomization and stuff. But yeah, that's pretty much it. If you guys enjoyed this video, this is how you make neurobass inside of the MPC. If you would like to see it done from scratch, then take a look at the masterclass that I have available also for free. But thank you all. Hopefully you enjoyed that, and I will see you in the next one. Hopefully this inspires more people to do more sound design stuff inside of the MPC, because you can. It's just kind of tedious. Anyways, see y'all later.